Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I'm going to cover something that I've wanted to cover for a couple weeks since it was released. If you're watching this on my 3 YouTube channels, X, Rumble, or now Substack, you'll see the cover of it. And it is the Interim Report, New Mexico Survivors Truth Commission, investigation of Jeffrey Epstein at Zorro Ranch. And this was released, you'll see that on the bottom there, August 5th, 2026. And not a lot of people have covered this to my knowledge, but I think it's definitely worth covering. I think that the release, this is not the final report, but this release I think is very well put together. It shows the care and the attention that they're taking to look into this very important matter. It also shows that the federal government is not helping them. Shouldn't be surprised. But the state of New Mexico is not getting help from the federal government, according to them in this document. And so you'll also see on this cover here, this was established pursuant to House Resolution 1, H.R. 1, which was approved February 16th, 2026, after the Epstein files were dropped. The last tranche was, I believe, January 30th. And it was passed 62-0, so everybody passed it. But that was the one that approved this $2 million outlay to set aside for research. So credit to the New Mexico House of Representatives and to the people of New Mexico in general, because I think they're putting money to a very worthwhile use. So a lot of people have come forward. I will actually show this. This is just the coverage here. But I think this is an important component. Zorro Ranch, people who know, is this huge mansion that was built kind of in the desert. It's directly south of Santa Fe on a map. Maybe I'll bring the map up, but it's also east of Albuquerque, I think about 30 or 45 minutes, but it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of nowhere. And there was a lot of things in these 302 files, these FBI files that came in that said that bodies were buried there. There's also Hank Harrison said some pretty incredible stuff. The guy who's the father of Courtney Love said some pretty incredible stuff about that. So I think that there's a lot to look into. And you can see this. They have a special counsel. So I think this is a pretty good job. They're doing a good job here. But I'll bring up the PDF, and I think it'll be instructive just to it's a 120-page document. And like I said, it's well worth your time to look into this interim report that was done, again, August 5th. So just we can read through this. This will probably be 45-minute, 60-minute coverage of this. But there's also tie-ins. There's like the Mesa killings. These women were buried in the desert right around the turn of the century. And I don't think they were ever solved, these deaths. And I'll bring that up as well, because that's what Hank Harrison said. Like, people were just taken out to the desert and buried. And it would seem strange that somebody would drive from Zorro Ranch to the other side of Albuquerque and then bury bodies. But stranger things have happened. But maybe it's just an example of that. First page is like content and advisory. So these stories are painful or activating. So care for their mental health. And this is the table of contents. You'll see that once you kind of look through this, there's 119 pages. But it goes into who was Jeffrey Epstein, background, the H.R. 1, what it did establish, the role of the special counsel, victim witness contacts, and then the initial investigative efforts. Like, some of the stuff's very interesting. It goes into the background, like did a kind of a historical analysis, like what was there before Zorro Ranch, how was it acquired, what was it, how was it approved, who were the operations, the personnel, what travel logs do they have, were there law enforcement calls, and then the investigative areas, sexual abuse and trafficking, institutional failures, power and motives, medical and scientific improprieties, financial crimes and irregularities and recovery. So they're going through observations, ongoing investigation. So this is the interim report. Like I said, this is the intro report. And here it says the content in this interim report is the result of months of review of Epstein files, Transparency Act, the stuff that's come out. Materials in response to subpoenas and other publicly available sources. The Truth Commission's review spanned the period of Jeffrey Epstein's known presence in New Mexico from the 1980s till 2019. So it's a substantial amount of time, 4 decades. Finally, this report offers a first step towards fashioning remedies and structures that will support full justice for survivors and will empower New Mexicans in the future to protect themselves from predators like Epstein. Summary, Section 1. Why is so little known about what Epstein did in New Mexico? Who was Jeffrey Epstein? I'm not going to cover this in total detail, but they do go over kind of his past. His secret retreats, organizational machines, conceals criminal behavior. Over many years, Epstein built a vast social network. He filled his black book with presidents and prime ministers, princes and princesses, cabinet secretaries, heads of finance and industry, media barons, Nobel laureates, leading educators and scientists of every stripe, and mavens of the arts, entertainment, and fashion. You don't see mavens used often. Epstein surrounded himself with a constellation of luminaries and invested and spent his wealth to both facilitate his wrongdoing and insulate himself from accountability. He sure did. Epstein in New Mexico, Zorro Ranch. Why is so little known about Epstein, what Epstein did in New Mexico? A first look at the available evidence reveals some truths that provide a context for seeking answers to these troubling questions. As detailed below in the discussion of institutional failures, the Zorro Ranch is in Stanley, New Mexico. Those directly responsible for protecting New Mexicans relied on others to do their job. Ultimately, as discussed further below, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Mexico, USAONM, and the New Mexico Attorney General declined to take action against Epstein, believing the U.S. Attorney in the SDNY, or Southern District of New York, would do so. But SDNY never prioritized New Mexicans, focusing instead on Epstein's misdeeds in New York, Palm Beach, Florida, and the Virgin Islands, while leaving Epstein's offenses in New Mexico unexamined. So that's a very important thing. So they declined to take action. Investigating authorities failed to issue search warrants, conduct searches, and seize evidence and property, including Zorro Ranch itself. So they acknowledge that is a failure. Moreover, investigating authorities failed for many years to take any action to investigate criminal activity in New Mexico, even after Epstein's death in August 2019 and Maxwell's conviction in 2021. Unfortunately, the passage of time and unexplained delay to open some people can't explain it. It's a cover-up. To open any criminal investigation focused on activities at Zorro Ranch may make it difficult, even assuming the full cooperation of other investigating authorities, to obtain the records, identify the witnesses, and collect all the evidence necessary to establish a complete chronology of the relevant facts as they pertain to Epstein's activities in New Mexico since 1980s. Investigations conducted by USAONM and New Mexico state law enforcement authorities closer to the events in question were never opened or were halted before all the evidence could be collected, while each awaited completion of the criminal investigation and prosecution. So they didn't act independently. That's acknowledged by this commission, this Truth Commission. Oh, I don't have this thing right. Let's see. Well, they have it as a slide. This is what I'm reading from. So that's very important. Then we go to the introduction. Background, mandate, and scope of the commission's inquiry. Numerous investigations, that's correct. Epstein's wrongdoing has attracted intense national and international attention from governments, the media, and private entities for decades, resulting in a body of information and evidence of massive proportions. That's correct. Approximately 6 million pages identified and 3.5 million pages released. So they validate what the government has said under Blanche and formerly Bondi, that only 3.5 were released, those 2.5 missing. But even this tranche of information does not tell the full story. Right. Many of the documents are redacted, hiding facts, witnesses, and potential co-conspirators. Even after so many investigations and inquiries, many questions remain unanswered. Correct. Well, it has been known that Epstein's sex trafficking operations was active in New Mexico for many years. No full investigation has been conducted by any federal, state, or local authority necessary to cover all the facts. So, yeah. Indeed, no search of Zorro Ranch was conducted until March 2026, almost 7 years after his death. Incredible stuff. And then this is H.R. 1. House Resolution H.R. 1 was approved February 16th, 2026 by the New Mexico House of Representatives on a vote of 62-0. H.R. 1 seeks to address the questions left unanswered as they relate to the activities of Epstein, his co-conspirators. So they acknowledge co-conspirators. They didn't do that back in 2019, 2020. They covered that up, the file by Berman, and his facilitators in New Mexico. So it's just so incredible. The government, the U.S. government's so corrupt. It's just makes you sick. They reference the United Nations, human rights. Core features of it, they talk about the truth commissions fulfill this right by identifying the causes and conditions of violations, establishing the identity of perpetrators, determining the fate and whereabouts of victims in cases of enforced disappearance, providing an authoritative narrative of past events to counter denialism. Right. That's very important. This denialism is a thing. It really is a thing about Epstein. Core features of a truth commission include focus on past events, not ongoing violations, investigate patterns of abuses over a period of time, engage widely with affected populations through testimonies, public hearings, and research, operate temporarily, ending with a final report. So that's what I'm expecting. I will go over the final report if and when it's released. Recommendations for reform, officially authorized by the state, often with political will and independence. So this is they're referencing international law. It's interesting. To support this effort, the New Mexico House of Representatives granted the committee all necessary powers and process, including the powers to conduct hearings, compel the attendance of witnesses, and administer oaths and issue subpoenas. Good. I hope they do it. The House further authorized the committee, subject to the availability of funding, to retain staff, including legal counsel, to assist in the committee's efforts. So I do think there's a set team of 10 or 20 people working on this exclusively, not outside counsel. H.R. 1 requires the committee to keep records of its work. Good. Role of the special counsel that go into this. Like I said, I'm not going to read this thing in toto, but it is interesting. They cover the investigative areas. I think really the importance is what's the background? They get the historical background of the Zorro Ranch, which I haven't seen recorded somewhere else. And then also they're saying the federal government is not helping them out. They're not getting the assistance of the government. Surprise, surprise. The investigations focus investigative areas. To fulfill H.R. 1's mandate, the committee, with assistance from retained counsel and investigators, has identified substantive investigative areas for inquiry into Epstein's activities at Zorro Ranch and in New Mexico. These investigative areas include the following: sexual abuse and trafficking. Who are the survivors? Who engaged in or facilitated their abuse? This investigative area covers the areas of grooming, abuse occurring at the Zorro Ranch, recruitment, and interstate trafficking. Institutional failures, yeah. This includes, but is not limited to, whether the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Mexico failed to investigate Epstein's activities in New Mexico, whether the New Mexico Attorney General failed to complete its investigation of Epstein, whether the New Mexico Attorney General's Office, now the New Mexico Department of Justice, failed to maintain a copy of records generated and collected in connection with its investigation of Epstein. So they may have collected records that they failed to maintain a copy. I don't know what the details are, but I'm looking forward to it. Power and motives. How did Epstein use his wealth and power to motivate others to cover for his crimes? The investigative area examines Epstein's use of his extensive social network of rich, powerful, and influential individuals and organizations to facilitate his wrongdoing and evade detection, investigation, prosecution, and other adverse consequences. And then they're inquiring into the medical and scientific improprieties. This is really important. Like, I hope they find something, because that's what the statements of some of the victims are saying. They're saying that they were experimented on there. It's a huge building. Did Epstein advance his wrongful activities through medicine and science? And if so, how? This investigative area relates to Epstein's documented interest in and support of medical and scientific advances, sometimes for unethical or improper purposes. This investigative area covers Epstein's interest in eugenics and transhumanism, as well as reports that he facilitated forced impregnation and non-consensual medical procedures. So they're looking, and then financial crimes and irregularities. So ultimately, investigation of these areas will seek to reveal: 1, what wrongdoing relating to Epstein occurred in New Mexico or elsewhere. 2, that's interesting. That's an interesting follow-on. So it's not just New Mexico. They'll look in to see if something happened outside of New Mexico. So good for them. Or elsewhere. 2, who participated in or facilitated this wrongdoing. 3, what entities and persons with power, wealth, and influence do or fail to do that facilitated or failed to prevent this wrongdoing. And 4, was this wrongdoing preventable? And if not, what action include legislation could have prevented it? Section 3, description of the committee's investigative procedures. Oh, I got to go forward here. I have this on slide. Let me do something else. Let me just share screen. I think this is better. Yeah, there we go. Description of the committee's investigative procedures, witness victim contacts, collaboration with the New Mexico DOJ. So they're going to do that. Truth Commission's initial investigative efforts. Commission's initial investigative efforts focused on organization of staff resources, development of investigative procedures, acquisition of necessary technologies, task delegation, and collection and review of documentary evidence. Then they mentioned the EFTA, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. They mentioned how things were revealed. They do break it down. Very important. They understand kind of the details of how they were released. The records are broken down into 12 data sets, which contain voluminous mixture of email chains, flight logs, bank statements, FBI interview summaries, and over 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. Moreover, the records are heavily redacted. Redactions are inconsistent and appear arbitrary. They sure do. For example, witness names will be redacted on one page, but not redacted on another. Or a name will be redacted alongside information that makes the name readily identifiable. True. Copies of the same document will be redacted differently. True. See, they understand stuff. That's good. Email information, addresses, and telephone numbers are redacted for no apparent purpose. Right. The identities of public officials are heavily redacted for no apparent reason. Some documents are redacted in their entirety. Right. This is part of the cover-up. They're covering up for certain stuff. Imagine what if you are in the Trump administration or the DOJ, where you have the unredacted documents, guys. That's power. Like, they know. So then they're doing favors. We know Trump is taking money for a variety of different stuff right now, and his administration. And there's backdoors and kind of weird thing on Truth Social. Like, you'll get, some kind of benefit to get information at certain times, I think. Things like that. But it's like, imagine if this is it. Like, oh, hey, I saw your name in this file. If you give me I'm not saying I'd have no evidence this is happening, but if somebody's on the take, you could probably get a pretty penny for proper redaction at any time. And you have to understand, I've done 3 shows on the anatomy of a cover-up, so people haven't seen that, you can go back and probably see those on YouTube or my, my podcast, because the cover-up started right away, guys. They started, I mean, there was that ridiculous thing where they had these influencers kind of show up at the White House and take those binders out, but all the while they were doing these redactions under Bondi, and she was like slow rolling it. They're on my desk. They couldn't have been on her desk. That's a total lie to the American people, because there are 6 million files and 180,000 images. So she's just like minimizing the extent and enormity of this stuff. Just, I mean, I know I've gone over this before, but I just like to emphasize this. But at least to the credit of New Mexico, they are covering this. Overall, using the EFT records to establish a verifiable and complete chronology of relevant facts is extremely tedious and time-consuming. Verifying any given fact amounts to searching for a needle in a haystack, right? It's deliberate. It's, I mean, in the day and age of like data mining and stuff like that, what they put out to the public is literally like a spit in the face of the American people. There's absolutely no question about it. It's such a joke and a misuse of American tax dollars. It's off the charts. So here they go. Data sets. What they also did is, like, the data sets were actually fairly uniform up until data set 8, but 9, 10, and 11 are just massive dumps of like millions of documents with no organization. A federal judge in any civil litigation would have just sent it back and said, if you send this back to me in this state, and that's not even my opinion, I think. If you send it to me in this state, I will censure you. I will fine you. But that's what they did to the public and made people go through it. And nobody, to my knowledge, has actually sensibly been able to go through it. Like, they've tried to AI it, and AI is not smart enough, frankly. They don't understand the meaning of some of these connections, and the AI can't get through the fake names and the subterfuge that's involved in some of these things. But yes, there's still significant gaps in the evidence. For example, Epstein's email communications cover only the period between 2009 and 2019. Right. So, I mean, I think this is the important one. Documents released under the EFTA constitute an important source of evidence. However, there are numerous facts documented in documents released under EFTA that cannot be verified or adequately assessed for credibility. For instance, the FBI received a tip on November 25th, 2019, that stated 2 dead bodies were buried at the ranch. That information, through testimony of former Attorney General Hector Valderas, revealed that tip was never provided to his office at the time it was given to the FBI. To date, the validity of the claim is unknown, nor its source known. Right, so it went into the FBI, and then it went memory hold. They go through their investigative theory and methodology. They've issued 20 subpoenas. And there's their subpoenas. But this is interesting. There's the compliance. All these people, Santa Fe Institute, that's interesting. That's where the association of Ghislaine Maxwell, her sister, is associated with that. And the guy, Molina, whose dad was part of the Suicide Squad, Jack Parsons. Like, you can't write this stuff. But here it is, like the USAO compliance refused on June 16, 2026. So literally the Southern District of New York just said, pound sand, you get nothing. And then the one in Florida is like, I'm not even going to respond. JP Morgan didn't respond. FAA didn't respond. Incredible stuff. Subpoenas issued by the commission. No response in June. 10 have been met with full compliance. 2 have been met with partial, and 8 have been met with refusals to comply or no response at all. The commission has received over 100,000 records in response to all subpoenas. So they do have these new records. It'll be interesting to see what those are, if they do pass them through. This is an interesting part of it. This is the one I mentioned at the intro, is this kind of timeline, which I hadn't seen before in this context. So I think it's important. Epstein acquired Zorro Ranch on March 1st, 1993. He bought the 7,600-acre property from a family of sitting Governor Bruce King, holding title through the Zorro Trust. 1996, first documented abuse at the ranch. A minor is groomed at Zorro Ranch, beginning with an unsolicited topless massage, per the Maxwell indictment. So 1996 to 2019, imagine literal over 20 years of abuse possibly there. 2004. And this is all the stuff that there's not covered in the EFTA because there's just no email, or there's no emails from that. They were using Blackberries and other communication devices. Minor flown to the ranch at age 15, 2004. 2006, survivors report to the FBI. FBI interviews a survivor who recounts 1996 interactions with Epstein in Maxwell, New York, and at Zorro Ranch. 2007, son of Governor Bruce King takes office as New Mexico AG in 2007. The commission found no evidence he investigated Epstein as Attorney General, so he's just not investigating him. And then Epstein bought property from his dad in 1993. So what are their connections? 2007-2010, Jane Doe 5 trafficked to the ranch, alleges in litigation that Epstein took her to Zorro Ranch multiple times between 2007 and 2010 and coerced her into sex. 2008, Epstein's Florida conviction is June 30th, 2008. That's right. And he's released in 2010. And then here it is, investigation timeline. Hector Balderas takes office as New Mexico AG, succeeds Gary King, 2015. John C. Anderson, 2018. Balderas opens investigation in May, July. Opened in May, July, and it's deferred. So it's interesting. He opens a criminal review before Epstein's arrested in July 2019. So right, so the federal indictment is returned July 8th, and Epstein dies August 10th. Epstein's indictment July 2nd. 2021, Fred Federici, U.S. attorney between John Anderson and Alexander Ubalas. Maxwell's conviction. 2021. Ryan Ellison is appointed by Bondi on April 18th, 2025. Never Senate confirmed. Survivor's Truth, which I'm reading now, is established February 16, 2026. And then the AG started criminal investigation. So I think it's different than the commission. So I think it's a concurring investigation. The commission also has had contact with numerous witnesses, potential and actual survivors, and other persons of interest. Of these contacts, some were the result of unsolicited emails, in-person interactions, telephone calls, or text messages. So it looks like people are making statements to these guys, which is good. So we might find new information. Epstein in New Mexico, Zorro Ranch, and beyond. So this is interesting too. Epstein maintained a residence in Santa Fe, New Mexico, off and on beginning in the early 1990s. At this point, little is known about Epstein's activities in Santa Fe prior to his acquisition of Zorro Ranch. Epstein acquired and developed Zorro Ranch as a vacation retreat approximately 5 years before he acquired his properties in the U.S. Virgin Islands, or the mansion in New York at 9 East 71st Street in 1998. So that's an interesting fact. So he was at the Zorro Ranch 5 years before the Little St. James and the mansion from Mel. On March 1st, 1993, Jeffrey Epstein acquired the property that he would name the Zorro Ranch. So he named it from sitting New Mexico Governor Bruce King and his brothers Don and Sam King. Then Representative Rhonda King acted as realtor on behalf of the King family. Epstein acquired the property through the Zorro Trust, an entity of which Epstein was trustee. Some years later, on December 16th, 2011, Zorro Trust transferred the ranch property to Cypress Inc., a Virgin Islands corporation of which Epstein was president. The Zorro Ranch remained Epstein's New Mexico residence up until the time of his death on August 10, 2019. Flight records and witness testimony indicate that Epstein spent approximately 2 to 5 weeks annually at Zorro Ranch from approximately 1994 to 2019. So he was there for about 1 month out of the year. John J. Kelly acted as an attorney in fact for Jeffrey Epstein on March 5, 1993 by executing the land lease component of the acquisition from the New Mexico State Land Office. Interesting. So it's from the New Mexico State. Kelly then served as U.S. Attorney for the District of New Mexico from 1993 to 2001. In 2026, Kelly released a statement stating, "In 1993, I was asked by the King family, with whom I was well acquainted, if I would assist with a real estate transaction between an out-of-state buyer and the King family with respect to one of the King family properties. That out-of-state buyer turned out to be Jeffrey Epstein." Kelly admitted to meeting Mr. Epstein in connection with the transaction, stating, "I assisted with the transaction as an attorney at the King family's request. I do not specifically recall any direct interactions with Mr. Epstein in connection with that transaction, and I do not recall ever encountering him again after that time." Kelly's name was listed in Epstein's Black Book of Contacts. Kelly stated he had absolutely no knowledge of Epstein's criminal conduct until it was reported by the press or in the press. And that it's like the size of the Zorro Ranch. Zorro Ranch is comprised of the following real property interests, which include land owned through a special warranty deed, as well as state and federal grazing and agricultural leases. So 84 acres, 1,158 acres, grazing lease. So you see the size of it here. The topography, parcel map with former state land leases, satellite view of ranch terrain. The state and federal leases are subject to use and other conditions administered by the New Mexico SLO and the Federal Bureau of Land Management. As discussed below, Epstein did not always comply with these conditions, nor were they always enforced by them. On July 20th, 1994, Ghislaine Maxwell signed a sworn appraisement of grazing and agricultural lands, attesting that she had inspected the property, was a disinterested party, and that the cash value per acre of the land was $300 if sold and $400 per acre for lease purposes. It is not clear at this time whether Epstein had acquired title to the 7,621 acres in one transaction. So he started improving it, and this is interesting. Epstein's improvements to Zorro Ranch. What would become the 28,636 square foot main residence did not exist upon Epstein's purchase of Zorro Ranch. Before this mansion was constructed, Epstein used a temporary structure which witnesses described as almost like a log cabin or a mobile home that was made to be very nice. Over time, a variety of structures were constructed, totaling approximately 50,000 square feet. These structures included staff cabins, guest houses, stables, and other function-based outbuildings. As one witness described it, there were all sorts of different homes, like little cabins or guest houses where different staff would live. Witnesses have stated that when visiting the ranch, they entered through the back of the house through a mudroom adjacent to the kitchen and were not permitted in other areas. Generally, they were not allowed in the rest of the house, although one witness was allowed into a library off the kitchen and occasionally in Ghislaine's bedroom. Epstein closely directed the many improvements to the property, including construction of the main residence. The main residence was constructed by Bradbury and Stamp Construction. According to the Santa Fe assessor, the Zorro Ranch is comprised of 7,621 acres. Improvements include a 3-story, 28,000 square foot main residence constructed in 1999, a 434 square foot guest house, a 1,800 square foot guest house constructed in 62, interesting, a 2,700 guest house constructed in 94, another guest house, more guest houses. So there's multiple guest houses. At one point, a helipad was constructed as part of a labyrinth garden. So you see that labyrinth garden at the back there. Epstein also had a private airstrip and hangar built. Epstein was also accused of relocating native petroglyphs on his property from one location to the next. So you see the size of this. The front entrance. It's almost like a church there on the left. That's the labyrinth garden at the back. Outbuildings, I guess is what they call them. Like there's different little outbuildings there. Zorro Ranch required continual upkeep and underwent frequent improvements from 1994 to 2019. Ranch personnel maintained regular documentation detailing maintenance requirements and taskings. Maintenance, repair, renovations, and other improvements had occurred on an ongoing basis over the years that Epstein owned the property. The commission has not conducted a complete accounting of maintenance. The account of scope of spending is not available from the EFTA documents alone. The property comprising Zorro Ranch was purchased in 2023 by Donald Huffines and his family, who report that they had no prior connection to Epstein and state they did not visit the property before he and his wife, through a limited liability corporation, purchased it. The ranch was renamed San Rafael Ranch, and the Huffines family announced plans to transform the property into a Christian retreat. Renovations of the ranch's buildings have been completed and are underway. The estate was sold at public auction. They intend to cooperate. There's a communications infrastructure, internet, fiber, telephone lines. They go into the operations here. They operated through a number of entities. Corporate structure evolved over the time Epstein owned Zorro Ranch. The list below describes the entities primarily involved in the management and operation of Zorro Ranch. Zorro Trust, Zorro Development Corporation, Darren Endike, PLLC, Harry Beller, and Richard Kahn. Both of those guys were called to testify to Congress this year. Little St. James LLC, Cypress Inc., Zorro Management. I go through the personnel: Ghislaine, Darren Endike, Richard Kahn, Larry Visosky, Dave Rogers, pilots, Jeannie Wiebrocht, certified CPA, Harry Beller, Cecil DeJong. DeJong was the wife of former U.S. Virgin Island Governor John DeJong. She served as office manager of Little St. James Enterprises. Bella Klein, financial administrator Leslie Koff, Sarah Kellen, Nadia Marcinkova. She also, I think, went by Nada Marcinkova. Janusz Banasiak, house worker, chauffeur, and maintenance worker. Mark Dober. Got all the names down. There's David Richard Mullen. This is one of his chefs. Mullen was Epstein's personal chef based in New York since about 2004. He was interviewed by the FBI in 2006. Mullen told the FBI he traveled with Epstein to Palm Beach and also to Zorro Ranch. He also stated that he frequently saw young females on Epstein's aircraft. He believed the females were from Spain or Russia and were 18 years or older, with others of questionable age. He believed the females were aspiring models. Mullen was one of only a series of personal cooks employed by Epstein. That's right. One of the other guys' name is Perry. Rogan interviewed him. Didn't ask him anything about Epstein. Intent, telltale. Zorro Ranch employees, Bryce Gordon, more pictures. And you can see what they did. They did something to that labyrinth. Like they dug it out. It's no longer there. Like, who did that? There were 5 to 6 full-time employees and seasonal employees there. Gordon got paid $200,000 a year, New Zealand national. So they've got all these names here. I've never seen them before, but housekeepers, ranch hands, staff members. Karina Shuliak, there's a picture of him and her at the mansion, a Belarus native who's naturalized U.S. citizen. Epstein uses fluence and the promise of a 10 to 15 million donation to get Shuliak admitted to Columbia University's dental school after she was initially rejected. A DOJ document shows Epstein made $631,000 in tuition payments to Shuliak alone. Wow, that's a huge number. Shuliak was the largest individual beneficiary of the Epstein estate. She received $50 million in cash plus a $50 million annuity, and all of Epstein's 6 properties: diamonds, carats, masseuses, therapists, the Zorro Ranch Inner Circle, aviation, rancher operations, personal household, legal. There's a lot of pictures in there of Epstein at the ranch with Vazovsky and Rogers, I think. I don't know what Bryce Gordon looks like, but I've seen pictures of like Vazovsky and Rogers run. I think with a helicopter too. I'd have to go back through and look through my my files. There they are. There's like unknown people. I've covered a lot of stuff about the art here. Jeff was assigned to the following task. When the painting of the Spanish nude with black hair arrives, it is to be hung in front of the telescope. Send a picture to J.E. first. That's interesting. I'm going to do a show on Lolita on Sunday night. And this telescope thing is kind of an important theme in Lolita, in Nabokov's Lolita. So maybe this has some kind of meaning. Nabokov's Lolita had a lot of meaning to Epstein. Lolita Express, and then probably his selling point to other people. And I think like Nabokov's Lolita sold an incredible amount of copies. It's like up there with Catcher in the Rye. But yeah, look forward to that show. Today's Friday. It'll be in 2 days. So you can check that out. But I have a lot to say about Lolita. Full of secret signs, cryptography, all kinds of things, these guys like. Flight logs, frequency of flights, branch visitors, firearms. Here's a guy, I don't know who that is, firearm. Yeah, this is kind of what it looked like. There's a lot of pictures of girls on the ranch. They all look like this. They don't have any fat. There's multiple girls. For people who don't know, I reposted one of a victim, where Epstein is holding her up like a bagged animal, like he bagged a rabbit or something. And she had a shirt on that was in Portuguese, and it referenced a children's show in Portuguese that kids watch, like their version of SpongeBob or something. But it really caught on with the Portuguese speaking world, because it was like he's holding up this girl with like a kid's shirt on, and had like 10 million hits or something crazy like that. Like I never get something that just never happens because it got shared worldwide. It's part of my Zorro Ranch presentations. So law enforcement calls to Zorro Ranch. Got a call on February 16, 2016. Logged call. Somebody went out there. Importantly, in August 2018, New Mexico State Police were called to Zorro Ranch to investigate a report of firearm theft. At this time, the commission has obtained no evidence showing that Epstein was ever under investigation. Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office documents 6 calls to Zorro Ranch. All of them occurred after Epstein's death. Let's see. Chavez, where 2 men approached him, was posting no trespassing signs. 2 males who spoke Spanish proceeded to assault him by punching and kicking him. So I think it's like this is like people are going out to check out what's going on out there. Discussion of investigative areas, survivors. Jane Does are in there. Some of these look familiar from the original thing against Epstein in 2006. I don't know if I want to read all these, but there's a lot. A lot of abuse. Reflexologist, masseuses, young women always around. Young women arrived by aircraft, helicopter. "10,000 waves." Witness statements indicate Epstein recruited massage therapists through his Santa Fe spa, 10,000 waves. Evidence shows that Epstein and Maxwell's patronage of 10,000 waves covers a span of at least 10 years, although with what frequency is not certain. American Express account statements prepared for Ghislaine Maxwell's show a May 23, 2005 charge to 10,000 waves in the amount of $805, and then a charge to 10,000 waves in the amount of $471. As noted above, an email dated 2015, Epstein told author and Kissinger Associates executive Joshua Cooper Ramo, a New Mexico native, that he was going to 10,000 waves. So there's another connection between Epstein and Kissinger there. Photographic evidence, the safe. FBI agents searching Epstein's 71st Street Manhattan residence found, inside a safe in a third-floor closet, several binders containing sleeves of compact discs, most of which are labeled with handwriting. The search warrant application describes one disc as marked Young, redacted. Another disc is marked Nudes, 00-2004. Another is marked Miscellaneous Nudes. Yet another is marked Girl Pics Nude. Some discs contain the word Zorro or LSJ. For example, one disc is marked Redacted Zorro Pics. A catalog was made of contents from a seized device computer. The first page listed a folder labeled Zorro alongside folders labeled Ties, Moscow Girls, Africa, Mini Nudes, Yoga Girls, Bali, Thailand, Russia, Book. The geographic organization of these folder names, which are sorted by nationality or region, is consistent with the trafficking routes documented elsewhere in the available documentation. So it just shows how vast it's. You have to see it as a worldwide trafficking organization, in my opinion. This is another one, interesting guy, Eddie Aragon. November 25th, 2019, Albuquerque radio host Eddie Aragon forwarded an email to the FBI. The original was sent from an encrypted Proton Mail account on November 21st, 2019, by someone claiming to be a former staff at Zorro. It alleged that two foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G. This email is anonymous, unverified claim that also demanded 1 Bitcoin for a USB drive allegedly containing video footage, listed specific video descriptions with timestamps, and provided a Bitcoin wallet address. The sender specified a payment deadline. Separately from the 2019 Proton Mail email, a different individual claimed to have trespassed onto Zorro Ranch in 2020 and found grave-like plots that appeared to have been excavated. Yeah, there's pictures of those somewhere. Yeah, they're published by Al Jazeera, March 17th, 2026. Chargeable criminal offenses: enticement of a child, prostitution, patronizing prostitutes, promoting prostitution, criminal sexual penetration, criminal sexual conduct, criminal sexual contact of a minor, human trafficking. Institutional failure, sex offender registration and notification act. So there's files of him like filling out his sex offender registration stuff because he was in 4 jurisdictions. And I think he had to do it every 6 months. So there's like a file within the Epstein files of him filling that out for New Mexico, Florida, New York, and the Virgin Islands. So that's there. And they all go back to these other things. There's another somebody, minor female in Austin, Bryce Gordon. That's 2007. It's concurring investigations. Removal of cattle. I would like to meet the requirements for cattle on land lease. Young cows. Cancellation of grazing lease. Evidence shows there were petroglyphs on the ranch. There are reports that Epstein removed petroglyphs from his property and used them as decorations. It is not clear whether the petroglyphs were found on state or federal lands. There's a picture of him going out to the petroglyphs. See if I can find those. Epstein's removal of the petroglyphs could implicate a number of statutes. So, power and motives, all the rich people, medical and scientific improprieties, dental practice at Zora Ranch. He had weird dental practices at almost every one of his spots, dental chairs and stuff. He might have had some kind of tooth fixation of his own teeth. I don't know. Intellectual interest and involvement in the Santa Fe Institute. That's important. Epstein advances intellectual interest by becoming a patron of various scientific causes. The biography presented at one academic conference noted that Epstein was a member or former member of the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, and the New York Academy of Sciences, a former Rockefeller University board member, and a former trustee of the Institute of International Education, the board of directors and president of the COUQ Foundation, one of the largest scientific philanthropies, funding topics such as biologically inspired financial computing, game theory, and the currency markets, personal genomics, and power. Wow. This same biography also included that Epstein was actively involved in the Santa Fe Institute, the theoretical biology initiative at the Institute for Advanced Study, and the quantum gravity program at the University of Pennsylvania, and also sat on the Mind, Brain, and Behavior Advisory Committee at Harvard University. According to its website, the Santa Fe Institute is an independent nonprofit theoretical research institute located in Santa Fe and dedicated to the multidisciplinary study of the fundamental principles of complex adaptive systems, including physical, computational, and biological and social systems. Nobel laureate Murray Gell-Mann, who proposed the quark model, founded SFI in 1984. In the acknowledgments section of his 1995 book, The Quark and the Jaguar, Gell-Mann thanked Epstein for his financial support. Wow. And they recommend this guy Gell-Mann as somebody who's going to join that. I think there was like a 12-person secret society that had the former head of the Fed in it. Like, oh, let's get Gell-Mann and have him sit on that. So, see all this stuff. Nowak, who's mentioned in the files. Epstein interacted frequently with SFI associates with whom he had close ties. Lawrence Krauss is there, so that's another Rogan guy. Groff. So the SFI, because it's located in New Mexico, these guys are focusing on that, this interim report. The commission is looking into reports that over years, Epstein donated $275,000 directly to SFI. This does not include donations made to individual SFI-affiliated scientists such as Martin Nowak. So that's their observations and continuing investigations. Review of the available evidence, including records produced in response to the commission's subpoenas, is incomplete and ongoing, so they're working on it. Observations. Given the record as it currently stands, it is possible and appropriate to make some obvious observations about the record, even while the investigation contemplates further factual refinement and revelations. First, Epstein maintained power and influence despite his sex offender status. The 2007 federal non-prosecution agreement allowed Epstein to continue his life largely uninterrupted until 2019, when he was picked up by federal authorities. He was first imprisoned 2008, 2009, and even then was released from a Florida jail on work release for up to 12 hours a day. A second observation is that Epstein operated his systemic sex abuse operation in plain sight, making little effort to hide the evidence and indicia of his criminal enterprise. Many of those invited into Epstein's circle would have seen the endless stream of young women and minors who were present on his aircraft and on his ranch. A third and final observation is that those in law enforcement most responsible for protecting New Mexicans from Epstein played a passive role in investigating him, letting others in Miami and New York to do it. As a result, the conduct of Epstein and his co-conspirators in New Mexico went unexamined and unpunished. Very important point. And that's the end of it, 119 pages. So that's an interesting document. I think it's important. Gives some insight, some overlook. It shows that the DOJ is not helping the state investigation, according to them, and also that it's an ongoing investigation, and also some information about the land use, and the building of that property that started 5 years before Epstein owned any property in Manhattan or the Virgin Islands. And then all these lists of names that validates other things that are in the files and in the black book that Nick Bryant, I just talked to, revealed, I think, in 2015. But anyway, that was it. Let's go back to the intro. Let's say the full title again. So I'll try to keep up with the story. It's the Interim Report, New Mexico Survivors Truth Commission, investigation of Jeffrey Epstein at Zorro Ranch. And this was released again on August 5th, 2026. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.